Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the May 25th regular council meeting for the afternoon. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel at youtube.com, District of Summerland. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. You can watch the meeting live or recorded at the the District of Summerland YouTube channel, youtube.com, District of Summerland. You can request to speak during the meeting. If you have not registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities, you may connect to the meeting by calling the meeting conference line at 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. After I have provided everybody who has pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those on the conference line. Director of Corporate Services, are there any late items to introduce? Thank you. So I will call for adoption of the agenda, please. Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Holmes, all in favor? Thank you. And then adoption of minutes from the May 10th regular afternoon meeting, the same date Committee of the Whole meeting, and May 17th Committee of the Whole meeting. Anything to change in there? Anything that's missing? All right, could I have someone bring forward adoption? Again, Councillor Holmes and Councillor Van Elfen. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 5, the delegations. We have a delegation today, 5.1, and I will pass this over to Dave Svetlichny to introduce the folks from BC Transit.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Today we have Chelsea Mossy and Adriana McMullen here from BC Transit to present council with on a few different topics, which then will segue into one of our first items on the agenda, which is the amend or the BC Transit operating agreement for 2021-22. So with that, I will pass it over to Chelsea and Adriana.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for having us here today. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully everyone will be able to see the presentation. Sorry, I muted myself there for a moment. Can everybody see the presentation? Great. All right. So as mentioned, my name is Chelsea Mossy. I'm senior met.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Only one person can see your screen. There we go.
Is it all good now?
Once it's enlarged, yes, and I see somebody here working on that. So if you just give us a couple of seconds here.
Of course.
We do have the presentation slides, but it's important for the viewing public.
Great.
There we go. Thank you very much.
All right. So my name is Chelsea Mossy. I'm the Senior Manager of Government Relations for the Okanagan region. I'm joined today by Adriana McMullen, our Senior Transit Planner for the South Okanagan-Similkameen Transit System. Okay, and now my slides will not advance. One moment. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing here for a moment. I don't know what's happening.
Chelsea, do you want me to share mine?
Just one moment. I'm going to try once more, Adriana. There we go. So everyone can see that?
Yes, thank you.
Great. All right. So I'm going to start today by just giving a brief overview of the BC Transit model, as I recognize it's been a while since we've had the opportunity to be in front of District of Summerland Council. I'll then discuss BC Transit's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as its impacts for transit. And then I'll discuss a couple upcoming projects that we're working on at BC Transit, and I'll turn it over to Adriana to discuss the upcoming expansions for the South Okanagan-Similkameen Transit System, and specifically for Summerland, and she'll then discuss briefly the Transit Future Action Plan. So who is BC Transit? We're the provincial authority that's responsible for providing transit service throughout British Columbia outside of Metro Vancouver, where it's provided by TransLink. We work in partnership with 58 local government partners. Of course, in this case, that's the District of Summerland. We work with 18 private management companies, 5 public organizations, and 14 nonprofits. This slide here just gives a quick snapshot of the BC Transit partnership model. So on the one side of things, we work with the province, who's responsible for setting public policy objectives. And then we also work with our 58 local government partners, who are ultimately responsible for setting the transit system's priorities, routes, and rates. And we hold the contract with our contracted operating companies. And in this case, that's Barry and Smith. This slide here just goes into a bit more detail on the roles and responsibilities of each party under the BC Transit model. So we at BC Transit are responsible for allocating provincial funding. We're also responsible for planning the transit systems to achieve local and provincial objectives. So that's working closely with our local government partners. As I said, we're responsible for arranging through contract for the operation of the transit systems. We procure and own the fleet, which we then lease to our local government partners. And we're responsible for a wide variety of shared services, including marketing, communications, planning, scheduling, and finance. And then it is our local government partners that are responsible for setting the local funding for the transit system, which in turn sets the service levels. They're also responsible for setting the routes and areas served, and responsible for setting the fare structure for the transit system. And it's our local government partners that are responsible for infrastructure, including bus stops, shelters, exchanges, and other amenities. Then our local operating companies, as I said, Barry and Smith, are responsible for putting day-to-day transit service on the road. They're responsible for managing their own labor relations, providing day-to-day customer service, and so forth. This slide here shows the legislated funding formula for transit systems. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the legislated funding formula for a conventional fixed route transit system. In those scenarios, the local government share is 53.31% of operating costs, while the province pays the remaining 46.69%. On the right, you'll see our custom transit legislated funding formula, or handy-dart. And for those transit systems, the local government share is 33.31%, and the province pays the remaining 66.69%. And the main reason why the province pays so much more for the custom transit systems is largely due to the low cost recovery from passenger fares. And as you'll see at the bottom, their local governments do retain 100% of the revenues gathered through the operation of transit service. And here for transit in Summerland, with it being a paratransit transit system, we use a blended funding formula. So it's a mixture of the two, with the District of Summerland paying 44.28% and the province paying 55.72% of your transit systems costs. I'll now go into BC Transit's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the impacts for transit. So in spring 2020, approximately 1 year ago, we were all adapting to the early stages of a pandemic that was rapidly unfolding around the world. At that time, BC Transit took steps to respond quickly and to continue providing essential transportation services to those people who relied on it. Our process can be broken down into 3 phases. Initially, it was the response phase, and that phase included enhanced cleaning of buses, limiting capacity on buses, and for our full-size buses that have 2 doors, we also moved to rear door boarding to reduce dwell time in front of the transit operators and protect their safety. We're now in the response phase, we are now in the recovery stage, and I will go into more detail on that on the next slide. and we look forward to eventually moving into the rebuild stage. So as I said, we're currently in the recovery phase of our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as you can see, our plans are aligned with BC's restart plan. Full driver barriers have now been installed in all conventional transit buses or vinyl barriers on our smaller buses. We're still using enhanced cleaning protocols. Face coverings are required on board all of our buses, and we continue to limit capacity to a comfortable passenger load. Looking ahead, if we continue to see province-wide improvements in the pandemic, we'll be looking at the possibility of increasing allowable capacity on board buses in the fall, and we'll also be focusing on a ridership recovery campaign. So the rebuild phase, or the future of transit, as we eventually look to come out of the COVID-19 pandemic, transit will continue to play a part in supporting economic recovery. And it will also continue to address the challenges in communities that existed prior to the pandemic, such as climate change, social isolation, and access to essential services. And transit will continue to contribute to vibrant and thriving communities. So this graph here compares 2019 provincial ridership, which you'll see in green, to provincial ridership across the province in 2020, which you'll see in blue, and 2021 ridership thus far is shown in yellow. So as you can see, the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic had immediate and lingering negative effects on transit ridership across the province. The low point in ridership was in April 2020, when it dropped to nearly 80% of normal. But since then, there's been slow and steady increase. And as of mid-April of this year around the province, we were at approximately 52% of 2019 ridership levels. So this slide here shows conventional transit, that's Route 30 Penticton-Summerland ridership in both the 2019-20 and 2020-2021 fiscal year. So as you can see, the high point of ridership was in May 2019 with approximately 755 rides, and the low point was in April 2020 with approximately 215 rides. And then recently in March 2021, we delivered 514 rides. This slide here shows the on-demand ridership in Summerland, again for the same period. So for this transit service, the high point was in October 2019 with 431 rides, and the low point was again in April 2020 with only 47 rides. So now just a couple projects that we are working on and some looking ahead. So we're currently working on implementing an electronic fare collection system on our fixed route buses. Our ultimate goal is to remove barriers to selecting transit as a preferred method of transportation. And the system will introduce new ways to pay via a mobile device or credit card. It's important to note that cash will continue to be an option for payment for transit service. We're just widening what we are accepting. And also this system will also provide us with better data on who our customers are to better enable decision-making. We're currently in the evaluation stages of a negotiated RFP process, and we're conducting engagement sessions with our local government partners. And there will be much more to come on this project in the months and years ahead. So our low carbon fleet program, in November 2018, BC Transit approved a low carbon fleet program to support provincial targets for greenhouse gas emissions, which align with the Clean BC plan. This plan is based on the fleet replacement needs for each of our vehicle classifications, and the timelines allow for a smaller deployment of electric buses by classification, which will allow us to obtain implementation and operating experience in each classification of buses before moving on to rolling it out in another classification of buses. So only compressed natural gas buses or CNG buses will be used to replace and expand the heavy duty and medium duty bus fleets until their transition to electrification. In November 2020, BC Transit released a request for proposal to support the first deployment of 10 battery electric buses, which, as you'll see in the next slide, will be introduced in Victoria in 2022, next year. So this slide here provides some key program objectives for our low carbon fleet program. I won't read them all out to you, but as you can see, we plan to begin purchasing only electric buses in all fleet classifications in 2028. And we plan to have a fully zero emission fleet by 2040. I'll now hand it over to Adriana to discuss expansions.
Great. Thanks very much, Chelsea. If you could flip over to the next slide, please. Wonderful. Thank you. So good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. I'll speak a little bit about this upcoming expansion and some of the choices we have, and then share some other news around expansions and service changes we have coming up. So first off, we'll start with Route 30. Route 30 is a route that began operating in October of 2013 between Summerlin and Penticton. We were hoping to expand the service. However, the pandemic happened and actually all of our expansions across the province were deferred, but we are now back looking forward to have these implemented in early 2022, so January 2022. And Route 30 is one of the candidates for this. So what the service currently provides is 4 scheduled round trips per day between Summerland and Penticton. It operates currently on weekdays only. And what we have is the capacity to add 10 additional round trips per week. And the big question we have that we will be asking residents of Summerland to give feedback on is when these new trips should occur. Next slide, please. Oh no.
One moment. I don't know why this is happening.
Great. So if we look at what the service is today, you can see that there are the 4 trips shown there. So each of the horizontal lines represents a trip. And we have option 1, if you want to go to the next slide, please, Chelsea. Option 1 introduces two trips in 2 ways. So one of them is a new midday trip that would operate sometime between 12:30 and 1 p.m. in the afternoon-ish. And then click again, please, Chelsea. And then the other 5 trips would be introducing service on Saturdays. So option 1 would give you a midday trip Monday through Friday and the introduction of service on Saturdays, which currently does not exist. Next slide, please. And again, for option 2, if we start where we're currently at, what option 2 will give you, click Chelsea, please, is again that midday Monday through Friday trip. So a trip that operates about 12:30 to 1 p.m. And that is a round trip from Summerlin to Penticton and back. And then next click, please, Chelsea. And then the other 5 trips would also be weekday trips, and they would occur in the evenings. So those are essentially the 2 choices, option 1 or option 2. Next click, Chelsea. And what we are preparing for public consultation, we examined 2 different formats with BC Transit engagement staff and also speaking with Summerland staff. And option 1 is an online and mail out survey postcard. It would be about an 8-week timeline to prepare, 2 to 3 weeks for people to complete and submit. It'd be very high level of inclusion because we would be sending out and including as much of the community as possible. The extra consideration is that we would also help really raise awareness of transit for people in the community who may not quite be as aware of it as we would like. And the one of the implications of going with this route is that the implementation date could be a little bit delayed, longer than what it would be if we went with the second option. And then the second option would be an online survey combined with a pickup survey where community members would have an opportunity to pick up a paper copy of a survey from either a transit bus or a few set locations within the community. So this is a slightly shorter timeline. However, it is a less inclusive format just because it puts the onus on the residents to initiate their participation. In terms of implementation, it is something we would be able to roll the service change out for sooner based on consultation with our engagement experts and staff. We are looking at pursuing option 1. And following this presentation, if you have any thoughts, please let us know. Next slide, please. And then in terms of our existing future plans, this chart shows that we have that service expansion coming up this coming January or in early 2022, and it is the 900 hours. Further than that, we don't actually have anything that is in the 3-year budget. Some of the things for consideration that we can explore as part of the Transit Future Action Plan can be the introduction of scheduled local service within Summerland, or maybe some opportunities to connect the upper and lower town on a scheduled service, or also providing feeder support for the Route 30 and the Route 70. Next slide, please. And then in terms of upcoming service changes, so this is the Route 70, which is funded or falls under the RDOS umbrella. We are looking this January to finally make those midday trips that right now are only on Mondays. We will be making those operate on all weekdays. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we'll begin to see those midday trips that are highlighted in yellow on that slide, which will greatly improve access to Kelowna and Peachland for residents of Summerland. So that's really exciting to see happen. Next slide, please. And then the Transit Future Action Plan. Next slide. This is a project that we had begun prior to the pandemic. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic and the election, and also the request to do some supplementary consultation on some topics in Penticton, we are going to be putting forward a new timeline. Next slide, please. And we'll come back to you and explain a little bit more about that project and provide some further information for council. But the key news to take back is that the timeline for completion has been slightly delayed, but we have some exciting expansion work coming up in the short term. Thank you, Chelsea.
All right, and then just our final slide today. This slide's been included in response to a question staff received from council, and that was regarding the possibility of offering complimentary transit on the Route 30. So just from a logistics perspective, if we're offering free transit on a route, it has to be offered for the whole route. So that would be offering it through to Penticton, and is likely, or not likely, it is certain that it would also be free for anyone in Penticton who's also looking to get on the Route 30, but there would also be other ways that we could look at doing this, and that could be something that we could work with staff on, such as offering passes that could be picked up at the district office for residents of Summerland for free transit, complimentary transit, or something like that. Just a couple thoughts though, when considering offering complimentary transit, it's important to consider the objective that you're hoping to achieve. We generally see that improving the quality of service, so the service frequency, the areas covered, and so forth, is more effective in increasing ridership than is eliminating fares. And if the intent is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the research tells us that offering complimentary transit will likely attract pedestrians and cyclists, but it's less likely to get people out of their vehicles. And it's also important to remember that the district receives 100% of the revenues from transit, so foregone revenue has to be considered. And it's also recommended that if this were to be pursued, that you just consider planning for the potential of increased demand, which would generate a need for increased service levels if this does increase ridership. So thank you very much. That concludes our presentation for today, and we're very open to any questions that council may have. And I will stop sharing.
Thank you. Council, questions? Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, thank you. I was the one who posed the question to you regarding the complementary transit, and my thinking was just within Summerland itself, not all the way to Penticton. The thinking being there's only 3 stops, I believe, within Summerland, and I don't think anybody, not that I know of, who actually use it just within Summerland, but just as a way to promote the route and make people aware of it. Anyway, I wanted to ask you another question regarding communications and marketing. And I'm just wondering, do you take different approaches to marketing communications, whether it's a rural route like Route 30 that goes from one community to another community, as opposed to a more urban and well-established, city bus route where people are kind of used to just hopping on the bus, whereas here it's still, quite a new concept, taking a bus to another community. And when you talk about the ridership recovery campaign, that might be an opportunity to not just look at recovering lost riders, but attracting new ones and promoting the route, because it's still not that well used, I don't think. It's kind of plateaued, I think, before the pandemic hit, and I don't think it's reached its potential.
Through the chair. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and certainly exactly how our ridership recovery campaign is going to be rolled out from a marketing and communications perspective is still being shaped. And that's excellent feedback that I can share with our marketing and communications team as they work on this plan. And I'll also just mention that in response to your first question, yes, we can definitely tailor our marketing efforts to our various sizes of communities and the various stages that our routes are at in terms of their maturity. And that would definitely be something that our marketing team would be more than happy to work with staff on.
Councillor Holmes has a follow-up.
Yeah, thank you. And then regarding the expanded service, I'm just wondering, we do have one more option of going to Penticton, and that's on Route 70. Of course, even though it's a Kelowna route, we can catch it on the way back. So, and I noticed that's a midday service coming back and going there, and from Penticton to Summerlin. So I'm just wondering if that was taken into consideration when you're looking at the expanded service for Route 30.
Adriana, do you have thoughts on that?
Yep. So because the fare is higher on the Route 70, and we would normally not be considering it as much as what we would, pardon me, I'm not phrasing this poorly. No, typically we would not consider a interregional connector as much competition for a local service. And we would view the Summerlin to Penticton service as more of a regional service versus that interregional scale of service. So yes, we would consider it slightly, but not too significantly. And so in this case, this is where we have that opportunity to find out from the community when they see there being more benefit to having the additional trips on the 30 operate. Certainly there is not exactly, and there will be unlikely to be a noon trip on the 70 ever, just because of the way the resourcing on that currently works. We have just one vehicle. And if we want to make the morning commute time and the evening commute time, then it means all of our services will likely be happening in the mornings or in the afternoons, but that midday period is difficult to have. But yeah, that's an excellent question. I hope I've answered it.
Any other questions, Council? Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the presentation, you talked about survey options. Were you looking for comment from council on which particular survey option we would suggest? Well, I have an opinion on that one, and I would go for the more comprehensive one myself. It looks like the delay would be relatively minor in the grand scheme of things, and certainly getting the times and such right is probably more important. What you
Through
would
the
get.
chair. Thank you. Yes, we had used that as our recommended option. So that is the option that we will be proceeding with unless council had any concerns with that. So that's excellent to hear that you'd support it.
I'm a little bit confused. So I'll ask you, Councillor Barkwell, first. Were you talking about the difference between option 1 and 2 in terms of the additional trips, or were you talking about options 1 and 2 in terms of how the public engagement goes, whether it's survey or postcard?
Yes, I was talking about the survey options. Yeah.
Great. Okay, good. Thank you. Any other questions, Council? I have just a few then. Barry and Smith has the contract here. Is that negotiated by BC Transit and Barry and Smith, or in collaboration with the district? And maybe that's a question for the Director of Finance, I'm not sure.
To my knowledge, Madam Mayor, it is an agreement that is worked out between BC Transit, because they're the ones that are providing the service, and the Barry and Smith. The district does not partake in those negotiations.
Okay, thank you for that. So a follow-up to that then. How long is it before the current term expires?
Chelsea, can you answer that?
I would want to get back to you on the exact of that. It was fairly recent that we went through an RFP process for the South Okanagan Snow Community Transit System. I want to say 2 or 3 years ago. So I will get back to staff on the exact terms of that agreement.
Okay, that would be great. And, you know, for future planning, thank you, because chances are it's going to go up. And then I wanted to just get clarification. I missed writing this number down. So it was the slide just after you talked about the funding for the 2 different options, I guess, delivery options. And then was it a combination of those 2 that came out to the 44.28% for local government, or for Summerland government? And then what is, oh, I guess it's the remainder of the 100%, right? Okay. And then I had, sorry, I thought I had one other question, but I think that was the question that Councillor Barkwell asked. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Council? Councillor Traynor, I don't see your hand up, so you're good? Great, thank you. So just get out of these slides here then. Could I have someone bring forward the resolution then to accept that for information, please? Councillor Holmes and Councillor Carlson. And then did you have a good understanding? There were a couple of questions in the slides. One of them was about option 1 or 2. So you've heard from Councillor Barkwell and myself. Other councillors? Everyone okay with option 1? Seeing heads nodding, good, that's good. And I can't remember where the other question was. Let's see if I can find it. Maybe it was just the community engagement that you need to do. Yeah, I don't see another question in there. So
Your
Oh,
worship,
yeah,
I
that
think.
was when those trips should occur, and that's part of the community engagement. Thank goodness that's not left up to us. Okay, so Councillor Carlson, you brought that forward, right, to receive, and we've answered the questions, and Councillor Holmes, and I'll call the question then. All in favor? Great, thank you. Thanks very much for your time today. Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
Oops, wrong one. Now for the first of our two public comment opportunities. I don't have any names written. You haven't heard from anyone. Okay, thank you. On to the first of our business items, 7.1, again is Dave, 2021 to 2022 BC Transit Annual Operating Agreement.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as we just heard, the District of Summerland's transit system is operated through BC Transit, and we annually sign an operating agreement with them to provide this service. The 2021-2022 operating agreement differs from last year's amended agreement by removing the 6-month lease fee waiver, as well as removing language around the one-time COVID-19 Safe Restart grant contribution that the district received last year. In essence, the attached agreement is reverting back to pre-COVID language and is comparable to historical agreements. Overall, the operating agreement reflects a $31,916 increase when we compare it to last year's amended agreement. Of course, the main reason for this increase relates to the 24,000 plus of COVID-19 Safe Restart funding, which was directly contributed by the province, which of course then decreased our overall cost to provide transit services. And as noted a moment ago, our revised agreement going into 2021 and 2022 does not include for this COVID Restart grant funding moving forward. In addition to the annual operating agreement, and which was touched on by the BC Transit delegation earlier this afternoon, BC Transit has approved the Route 30 expansion, which will provide an additional 900 service hours for the residents of Summerland. And as noted, BC Transit will begin to engage the public shortly on how best to utilize these additional hours. And if the engagement goes well, we're hopeful this expansion will go live in the first quarter of 2022. That summarizes my report, Madam Mayor, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions, Council? Okay, I'll ask for someone to bring forward the motion, please. Anyone? Councillor Holmes, thank you.
That council authorized the mayor and corporate officer to execute the 2021 to 2022 annual operating agreement between BC Transit and the District of Summerland as attached to the report of the Director of Finance dated May 25th, 2021.
Thanks, Councillor Holmes. Seconder? Councillor Carlson? Any further discussion? All in favor? And none opposed. Thank you. 7.2, 2022 permissive tax exemption process, and Mr. Svetlичny again. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The community charter provides council with the authority to grant permissive tax exemptions, and these exemptions are implemented by bylaw and historically provide tax exemptions for multiple years. For the 2021 calendar year, permissive tax exemptions in Summerland totaled approximately $166,650. $37,850 were places of worship, with the remaining $128,800 provided to nonprofit organizations. In the summer of 2016, Council went through a comprehensive permissive tax exemption workshop, and as a result of that work completed, Council resolved to provide places of worship with permissive tax exemptions for 10 years, And additionally, qualifying nonprofit organizations received a 100% permissive tax exemption for a 4-year period, which ended in 2020. Now, due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, a comprehensive review of not-for-profit permissive tax exemption submissions did not occur in 2020, and Council approved a 1-year extension to all not-for-profits that were receiving permissive tax exemptions at the time for the 2021 taxation year. To ensure the district meets our obligations for the October 31st legislated deadline, staff have proposed a timeline for Council's consideration, which is part of the report. One item to highlight is the timeline notes that all applicants will be requested to attend a committee of the whole meeting, which will be scheduled in September, to answer any questions Council may have. Now, this is currently not a regular practice with such applications and is not part of the district's permissive tax exemption policy. However, Council over the past few years has noted that this would provide valuable insight and is therefore being included as part of the timeline at this time. That summarizes my report, Madam Mayor, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So then we'll be contacting all the non-for-profits, and if they come and do a presentation, and if not, they're off the list? Through to our Director of Finance?
Through the Mayor, part of our initial process is to send out letters to each individual not-for-profit that is currently receiving a permissive tax exemption, just letting them know that this is the process that we're going to be moving forward with, providing them with the application to ensure that they have the paperwork that they require to submit an application. Any not-for-profits that are currently not receiving permissive tax exemptions, we will be advertising through the newspaper as well as on our Facebook page and different types of media to ensure that the awareness is out there for those organizations that there is the opportunity to apply.
Thank you.
I have a question for our Director of Corporate Services. Is this process part of a policy or is it not?
I would actually address that to Dave as far as the policy, because I believe we extended the policy last year. The policy was to provide for multiple years, and it's an annual process that's governed by the legislation. However, Council has the ability to put in place a program.
Okay, thank you. That answers that part of the question, which was leading to another one. Thank you, Karen. So I think this one is for you as well, but maybe not. If it's part of a policy, then does the change that Council has requested to have people that are applying come before Council, does that need to be part of the policy, or is it just something that is considered part of the process?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council can require members of different organizations to present to Council. So just by resolution today, you can do that. You could include it as part of a process if you'd like to do that. It's really the will of Council.
Okay, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I personally would like to see a presentation, and also a question through to our Director of Finance. Are financial statements included? Will they have to supply financials to qualify for a permissive tax exemption?
Through the Mayor, Councillor Van Elfen, yes. The draft application was included with the report, and there are 5 or 6 enclosures that is required from the organization. Financial statements being one, a copy of budgets, any lease agreements, so those types of things, and a copy of their charity information returns as well. So the list is somewhat extensive, but it does cover everything.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wondering if we will be looking at this to give a, I don't see it. I see 2022 tax exemption, but not necessarily looking at this for a long-term or for a multi-year exemption. So I'm just wondering if I've missed something, or if we're going to be looking at a 3 or 4 year.
Through the mayor, thank you, Councillor Carlson. Normally what the process would be is once the vetting process has gone through and the applications have all been received, council would have that conversation at that time as to determine whether or not you wanted to go ahead with another 4-year bylaw, or if you wanted to decrease it down to 3 years or 2 years, or the wish of council at the time.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, then, if someone either wasn't eligible or perhaps they missed in 2022, but we offered a longer term, would next year we open this process again to anybody who might qualify?
Thank you. Great question. The process itself would not go back through the entire application process for everyone. What would happen is if an applicant for one reason or another was unable to submit an application this time around, then what's happened historically and just actually 2 years ago with one organization, they can bring forward an application and council can view the merits of it. And if a decision is made to include them, then all we would need to do is just do an amending bylaw to amend the bylaw to get them onto the list.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Could I have someone bring forward the recommendations, please? Councillor Carlson.
I will move that the report from the Director of Finance dated May 25th, 2021 regarding the 2022 permissive tax exemption process be received for information, and that Council direct staff to follow the permissive tax exemption process for the 2022 calendar year as noted in the 2022 permissive tax exemption process report dated May 25th, 2021.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Van Elfen. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? And none opposed. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Svetlичny. On to 7.3, South Okanagan Similkameen Regional Child Care Action Plan Report. And this is being presented by our Director of Community Services, Lori Mullen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. I'm just going to share my screen here. All right. The South Okanagan Similkameen Child Care Action Project is a collaborative endeavor with resolutions of support from the District of Summerland, Village of Karamias, Town of Princeton, and the Town of Oliver joining the Regional District of the South Okanagan Similkameen to apply for a UBCM grant to complete a regional childcare study. A steering committee with representatives from each of the partnering local governments was successful in receiving full funding support. The steering committee later expanded to include representation from the City of Penticton and One Sky Community Resources. The Child Care Action Project was launched in July 2020 through engaging Spark BC to lead work with the steering committee after a public request for proposal process. The 10-year action plan was created by reviewing promising practices in other jurisdictions, reviewing current policy and planning frameworks for each partnering municipality, current demographics and childcare service information, and engaging with a wide range of community members and partners. The appendices to the action plan report include a summary of all recommendations, a glossary of childcare types in BC, the community engagement summary report, and the community profile report. Engagement activities included an online survey of 254 parents and caregivers with 432 children aged 0 to 12, interviews with 71 key stakeholders and partners, and 3 virtual solutions workshops with 37 participants. Early learning and childcare policy and funding is primarily a provincial responsibility with some federal involvement. While provincial responsibility for childcare currently spans 3 ministries, the province has announced that childcare will be integrated into the Ministry of Education by 2023. Local and regional governments do not have the mandate or resources to fully address the unmet needs for childcare on their own. However, by working together, the communities of the South Okanagan-Similkameen region can strengthen the positions of each separate jurisdiction. Not only are the region's childcare systems and supports interconnected, but families also currently secure services whenever they are available, and existing partnerships and opportunities are often regional. The project has confirmed that there is a significant shortage of childcare spaces throughout the region, especially for infant toddlers and school-aged children. Childcare is expensive for families, and there is a shortage of qualified, experienced early childhood educators. The action plan includes 41 evidence-based recommendations around 4 strategic priority areas closely aligned with the province's childcare commitments. The 4 strategic priority areas are increasing accessibility, improving affordability, focusing on quality, and strengthening partnerships. Currently across the region, excluding Penticton and Osoyoos, the number of childcare spaces per 100 children are 19 spaces for children 0 to 12 years, 4 spaces for children under 3, 31 spaces for 3 to 5-year-olds, and 14 spaces for children kindergarten to 12 years. The action plan outlines that the recommended target is to have 33% coverage rate for children under 3, as well as school-aged children, and 50% coverage for children 3 to 5 years old. In order to meet those targets for group childcare by 2031, 1,100 spaces are required across the region. The following slides provide some of the highlighted regional findings and key recommendations, with full details and recommendations outlined in the report. It was identified that 73% of children were on a wait list for over 6 months and 42% for over 1 year. There are limited options for those who work shifts or on weekends, and already underserved and more vulnerable populations face additional barriers. Key recommendations are to endorse targets to create 1,100 new licensed spaces over the next 10 years, to develop a South Okanagan regional childcare policy and an ongoing childcare action group, and to work with other public partners to identify opportunities for childcare development and to access provincial capital funds to build new spaces. The plan found that high costs are a barrier, create financial stress, and result in difficult decisions for parents. Lower fees were identified as a top factor to help families. Childcare for children not yet in school costs $600 to $1,065 per month, and there is a disproportionate impact on low-income and vulnerable families. Recommendations include supporting not-for-profit childcare centers with grants and leases for government-owned land at no cost or below market rates to enable them to lower fees for families. Partnering with Childcare Resource and Referral to more proactively promote BC's Affordable Childcare Benefit Program, and advocating to senior governments to reduce the cost of childcare for families. The research shows on average, nonprofit public spaces offer better quality childcare. Well-trained supported staff and quality indoor and outdoor space are critical to quality of care. And there's a difficulty in finding and retaining qualified and experienced staff. Recommendations suggest increasing local ECE training and practicum opportunities and encouraging young people to enter the field. Supporting the province's early care and learning recruitment and retention strategy, and collaborating to ensure the needs of children who require additional support are met. It was found that no one partner or jurisdiction can address childcare on their own. The plan recommends developing strong partnerships and joint planning protocols with school districts, building collaborative and learning relationships with Métis and First Nations to support Indigenous culture, perspective, and histories into childcare. Advocating to senior levels of governments to support the childcare sector and families, and sharing information and collaborating on regional actions and planning. It is recommended that a regional child care action group is established to implement and monitor progress around implementing the child care action plan. Pages 45 to 52 in the action plan provide Summerland specific information. A few of the Summerland specific highlights include 19% of employed residents of Summerland have commute times of over 30 minutes, which suggests the need for longer hours of care to accommodate the commutes. 46% of parents with childcare arrangement other than a parent or relative reported that securing their own arrangement was very difficult. Parents in Summerland were most likely of all parents in the region to say their selected current childcare arrangement, they selected their current childcare arrangement because it was the first one to offer that space, rather than other considerations such as program activities or reputation. 58% of parents said that they would change their current childcare arrangement if they could. Summerland parents and caregivers were also the most likely in the region to report spending time on childcare waiting lists. 47% of survey respondents currently using parental or relative care were currently on a wait list compared to the regional rate of 25%. For those using a form of care other than a parent or relative, 73% had been on a wait list to secure that childcare spot compared to 54% across the region. 74% who had been on a wait list experienced wait list over 6 months, and 53% were on wait list for over 1 year. When parents were asked about their satisfaction with their current care arrangement, 58% were satisfied with the hours of care, 58% were satisfied with the location, and 31% were satisfied with the cost. According to the 2016 census, the District of Summerland has about 1,200 children from birth to age 12. As shown in the table, the number of children is expected to increase significantly by 2031, with an increase of 15%. In total, the District of Summerland has 220 licensed childcare spaces, or 19 spaces for every 100 children from birth to age 12. The space targets presented in this slide are based on projected child population for 2031 and are aligned with the regional recommendations. To reach the recommended space targets, Summerland would need an additional 309 group spaces for children aged 0 to 12 by 2031. And that equates to 78 spaces for children under 3, 52 spaces for 3 to 5-year-olds, and 179 spaces for school-aged children. The action plan recommends that the district commits to actively working towards incorporating childcare in the proposed Summerland Community and Recreation Health Center. That concludes my presentation. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or I will follow up with the consultants with any questions that I am unable to answer.
Questions, Council? Lori, thank you. I just need to be able to see Councillor Traynor. There we go. Okay. Council questions? Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. The results of this don't surprise me. It's a huge challenge, especially for infants and little babies. There's a lot of families in this community that have one parent that doesn't work for if not just 1 year, but many years while they wait for their children to be old enough to either find daycare or go to school. So yeah, fortunately, I have a nanny right now, so I'm able to be here. One of the things I'm wondering is, in the survey and in the results, was there a differentiation between, there's a lot of parents and mothers who offer, mostly mothers, that will offer childcare. If they have their own kid, then maybe they'll bring 2 other kids that come over every day, and that's a huge way that people get childcare in this community. But none of that is actually eligible for provincial funding, at least as it's currently set up. So I'm wondering if that's been taken into consideration, because I believe those numbers are showing up, but I don't know if, when it comes to the $10 a day childcare, if that's even going to impact how that works. I don't know if my question makes sense, but that's kind of where I'm going.
Sorry, what is your question? Sorry.
Are they taking into consideration that the majority of childcare in this community is offered by other families?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Carson, through Madam Mayor. The study of the statistics that came out of this report does not include the feedback or the statistics from unlicensed spaces or those that are kind of not registered through Child Care Resource and Referral. I expect in the future that if parents wanted to be eligible for $10 a day or subsidy, it would have to be a licensed childcare, is my guess.
So potentially the 309 could be higher than that. Is that what
Well,
you're
if I think it's going, well, I guess potentially, but if there's, if parents are currently using one form, and say it costs $50 per child per day, but now there's going to be an opportunity to build multiple new spaces, and they're only going to cost $10 a day, I think there's a lot of people who may not have been counted in the survey that will then be also looking for that $10 a day childcare. So it's just something to keep in mind, I think.
Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, thank you. I asked the same question when it came to the RDUS, and it was clear it was only registered childcare spots they were talking about. So also like junior kindergarten programs at Montessori or Unisys, puddle jumpers, all those kind of programs weren't included in this. So, it would be nice to know that information. I don't think it really changes the narrative of the report, but it'd be nice to have that bigger picture. And when we move towards, daycare, who qualifies and who doesn't, that's a question that's going to have to be answered at some point. Thanks.
Any other questions? I just have a comment, Lori. I'm really glad that we're able to get this document. It's what we've been thinking, but it's really good to see that the data is there now to support what we're looking for in terms of a potential childcare spaces at the new facility or the retrofitted facility, renovated facility. So thank you for that and bringing this forward. It's good timing. Okay, Council, if there aren't any further questions, I'll have someone bring forward the recommendation. Yeah, to receive this for information, Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Holmes, seconder. Any further discussions? All in favor? Great, thank you. Next item is 7.4, Recreation/Community Services Fees and Charges Bylaw Amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that's back to me. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 2021-027 for first, second, and third readings. The District of Summerland fees and charges for the Recreation Department fees has not been reviewed or updated since 2012. Previous rate increases have been implemented in 2009 and 2006. At the November 30th, 2020 council meeting, staff presented market research on Parks and Recreation fees and charges and highlighted key findings. Through feedback received from council, staff compiled principles and directions to further guide the fees and charges review process. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee met on March 2nd to review the fees and charges, market research key findings, and the council principles and direction. Staff corresponded with all indoor minor sport user groups and various other sport organizations to discuss the fees and charges review. Staff presented proposed fees and charges for 2022 to 2024 to council on May 10th. As per council's recommendation at the May 10th meeting, reduced fees for local youth have been included for the Summerland Arts and Cultural Center upper floor meeting room. Youth rates for Center Stage Theatre will be discussed at a later date, together with the future operational discussions with schools of District 67 and the Summerland Community Arts Council. These fees would be implemented in 2022 with the exception of the Arts and Cultural Center fees to be effective post-renovation, which is targeted September of this year. The anticipated changes to the Parks and Recreation revenues with the increased fees and charges will be reflected in the 2022 financial plan. Historical pre-COVID revenues have averaged approximately $813,000 on an annual basis, and the subsidy in 2019 was just over $708,000. If admission, attendance, and rental bookings were the same as pre-COVID, the increase in annual revenues based on the proposed fees and charges would be approximately $25,000 in 2022. The proposed fees and charges have been updated into Schedule I and are being brought forward for the first 3 readings. If endorsed, the fees and charges amendment will be brought forward for adoption at the next meeting on June 14th. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Questions? Okay, could I have someone bring this forward for first, second, and third reading, please? Councillor Patton, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Van Elfen. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. On to 7.5, Cultural Plan Update, and this will be introduced by CAO Stat.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll say a few words and then pass it over to Lori. So I actually asked staff to provide an update on the cultural plan to council because it does remain a council priority. However, the committee has not been meeting, and the dedicated staff person, the community development coordinator, was laid off due to COVID cutbacks. Many elements of the plan have seen good progress, but others are on hold or not implemented yet. So at this point, we're just providing this as information update to council, but further council guidance would be appreciated as to whether certain elements of the plan should be picked up again or if the committee should be formally reactivated or rejuvenated. If council sees this as a priority, and assuming we are not rehiring the full-time position associated with the plan at this time, we would need to have staff adjust work plans and report back to council at a later date on the result of that exercise. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lori.
Thank you. So as Graham has mentioned, the District of Summerland Cultural Plan is guiding the work of district staff. It was finalized in 2016 and was developed from the input of more than 2,300 comments received through an extensive year-long public consultation process. The cultural plan outlines 5 strategic directions and identifies 5 collective values, which are outlined in the council report. While the document recognizes that the District of Summerland is encouraged to facilitate the implementation of the plan, it also notes that well-established community groups are best suited to undertake many of the initiatives through mutual trust, cooperation, and coordination. In the spring of 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic arrived, the District of Summerland responded with budget reductions, including temporary and permanent staff layoffs. The elimination of the community development coordinator resulted in a loss of dedicated resources which had facilitated and supported arts, culture, and heritage. The spreadsheet, which is attached to the council report, outlines the cultural plan, strategic directions, and the status and related information on each of the recommended action for council's review. While some of the actions are currently underway and undergoing, some have not started or are on hold. The items currently not actioned include the recommendations to include a cultural impact statement where applicable in District of Summerland staff reports to council, review municipal bylaws to ensure that they do not impede cultural development or community beautification, to review the current funding model for cultural investments and work towards the national average of funding for communities of a similar size, to hire a community coordinator, establish a community cultural committee to oversee the implementation of the cultural plan, and act as a liaison between the various arts and cultural groups and municipal council, to develop a public art policy, build capacity by creating opportunities to support, empower, and recognize community volunteers and volunteer organizations through initiatives like volunteer fairs, grant writing workshops, and educational seminars, annual community awards, and a central database for local volunteer opportunities. To work with the Museum and Heritage Society to develop a long-term plan to support the museum, name a street or public space after George Riga, and develop clear, cohesive, creative signage and maps. The Summerland Cultural Plan provides strategic direction and actions on becoming a culturally vibrant and cohesive community. While staffing resources dedicated to support the implementation of this plan have been reduced, the plan is still a priority and some actions are currently underway. If council direction is to activate more items from the cultural plan at this time, staff will be required to adjust existing resources and return to council for advice on the impacts to other work plan items. So with that, I turn it back to council for any direction if further action is required. Thank you.
Questions, council? Is your hand? No. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I see a lot of items on the list where it's heading direction required. Does that mean we should be going through the whole thing and discussing each one of the items where direction is required? Or how are we going to approach this?
What are you looking for from us today? Specifics like that, Lori, or what are you thinking?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Graham and I are both looking for some direction from council if there's items that are not currently actioned. If it is the desire for council to move forward on some of those items, that would be appreciated, and we can visit those items.
Thank you. So before we get started on that, Councillor Carlson, did you have a question or was it related to that? Related to that, okay. Okay, so we'll go through the list starting at the top on the first page for the direction required items. The first one include a cultural impact statement where applicable in District of Summerland staff reports to council. So those are the requests for decisions we get. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, so my recollection, the intent of this was to inform council of the impact, either positive or negative, on any of the 5 cultural values of the community that we ought to be aware of. For example, that you know, that this promotes agriculture, or this is going to have a negative impact on the character of the community, or whatever the case may be. And I think it was mainly the intent was just to get the district thinking with a cultural lens. That was the term that was used, thrown around at the time. So, you know, how important that is, I don't know, but that was kind of the intent, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have remembered correctly. Other council thoughts on that? If this is something that you'd like to see in our staff reports or requests for decisions? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone's hand raised. So do we leave it in there, or Councillor Trainer?
Yeah, I think if it's not too much work, a statement might be helpful, because just like Councillor Holmes said, it just keeps culture at the top of our mind and reminds us to think about culture when we're making decisions. So, you know, if it's something that's obvious and not, you know, too time consuming for staff, I think that a statement in our reports where we're asked to make a decision would be helpful. And like I said, serve as a good reminder that we do have this plan, and to just take a moment to look at it through a cultural lens. So I think it would be helpful.
Thank you. Anyone else's thoughts? Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, I guess just an example of, you know, if you take something like the food hub we're doing, I mean, why are we doing it? Because it fits in with the culture of the community. If it was something like I don't know, an auto parts innovation center, I think you'd rightly ask, why are we doing this? You know, it fits in with the economy of the question of the community, but you know, that's connected with the culture. So that's just an example I would put out there. Whether that needs to be a formal policy or not, I don't think it matters. But as long as you know, we have that in our mind, that, you know, does it fit in with our values?
Anyone else? I'm kind of, Councillor Barkwell.
I would suggest that on any particular issue, the cultural aspects, as in this plan, are usually kind of obvious, but it certainly wouldn't hurt to have staff just have a line item to remind us, or maybe there's something that we don't think of for ourselves that would be worthy of discussion. So as was said before, if it's not involving a whole pile of work, I think it's probably a good idea. I expect that it wouldn't require an additional amount, a great deal of additional work, and it might bring up something for discussion that we wouldn't otherwise think of.
Okay. I'm kind of wondering if it can go where it shows strategic priority. We didn't used to have that before either. And I really like having that strategic priority. It always reminds us of where it fits, and often it fits in more than one. I'm wondering if the cultural impact could be, you know, a bullet below that. Does that make sense for where it might fit? I guess maybe this question is for a Director of Corporate Services. So where it shows strategic priority, and then we have one of our six key themes or more usually, it would show there. Is that the spot where it would make the most sense for it to go in?
Madam Mayor, I think that could be a spot for sure. And I think what staff would do is take this information away and then come back with potentially what that statement is and where it might be best suited on the report.
And I like the fact that it's, just like Councillor Holmes said, it kind of keeps it top of mind. And when it's the first thing that we see in the report, that's a good way to keep it top of mind too. Thank you. Okay, so I get the feeling that this is something that we would like to see some movement on then, Lori? Okay. So the next one then is review municipal bylaws to ensure they do not impede cultural development or community beautification. I know that a number of our bylaws are being reviewed right now, and it's a bit of a process. Council, do you have thoughts on where this might fit? Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think the intent was just to review all the bylaws, but as bylaws are reviewed, to keep that in mind. And if I remember correctly, it was the examples that were cited at the time is it was awfully difficult, for example, businesses to have outdoor patio seating because our bylaws were kind of impeded that. I think we've changed that since. And also like fees for putting up banners and things like that. It was more of a deterrent for organizations to do these things than encourage them. I think we've come a long way on a lot of these things, and but I still say I still think it's worth that when we are reviewing bylaws that we look out for these sort of things.
So not necessarily a change to re-review bylaws, but as they're coming forward, that's what you're suggesting, Councillor Holmes? Yeah. Any thoughts on that, or any other questions or comments on this one? Okay, does that suit your needs? Yeah, okay. Next one is hire a community coordinator. Oh, pardon me. Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Review the current funding model. Thoughts? Councillor Holmes.
I imagine this is quite difficult to do. You can calculate these kind of numbers many different ways. Probably the Director of Finance has more on his plate right now, so I wouldn't consider it a priority. But as long as I understand, I know where the task force was coming from when they made this recommendation, and so I don't really have a view on this one way or another. Thanks.
Okay, any other thoughts on this one? Councillor Carlson.
The one thing that does come to mind is that this council does continue to fund our cultural community, and right now the investment that's being made into the Arts and Cultural Centre, I think, is quite significant, and it's a place to, obviously that's not the end be all and end all, but it's definitely an investment that I think we should be proud that we've made, and we should be working with the people who use that space and seeing what's next, what other investment needs to be made to improve and to build and to create the cultural community that we aspire to, not only as council, but also as a community and as a whole. So I don't think it necessarily needs to be extra work added on to anybody's plate, but I do think that we should recognize that an investment is being made.
Okay. So put that one on hold for now. I'm seeing a few nods. Is that what you were suggesting, Councillor Carlson? Yeah. Councillor Traynor? Okay, so that one's on hold then. But still recognizing, like you said, the funding that is being put into that. Hire a community coordinator. Councillor Van Elfen and then Councillor Carlson.
I don't feel comfortable with that at this present time. I think it still goes back to, a priority of council, as has been mentioned before, and I know Councillor Holmes has mentioned it, and I think, being a line item in every report that comes back to council, what's the cultural impact? I mean, this is a discussion that we should be having around the table on everything, every development application that comes before us and stuff like that. Where's the cultural impact here? What cultural impact benefit could we achieve? I don't think it's the time right now for looking at hiring people. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
My comment on that is I think a lot of very good progress was made during the time that we did have someone working in this position. I think that this point and also the next one, which is about a community cultural committee, I think that we should have some more conversation with the it's not an ad hoc group, but I suppose it's a non-municipal group, the Summerland Cultural Coalition. They're doing some really fantastic stuff, and I believe that part of that was initiated through the fact that we had a community coordinator for a while, and I think that they could get to a position where they're ready to take the lead and do those things so that the district doesn't. So I'll put that out there, and it can sort of lead us into the next question mark, I guess. Have you seen their website and heard their mission?
I haven't seen it. Well, the last time I saw it, there really wasn't anything there, but hopefully there's more there now. Yes, there is.
There is, and they're working quite hard. There's not a lot of events going on right now, so it's hard to populate the calendar that they do have, but I believe it's mysummerland.com. It's kind of neat what they're working towards.
Okay, great. I have a question for you on this one, Lori. In the comments or the notes, it says the committee was paused when the community development coordinator position was eliminated. So we're talking about the existing coalition, which Councillor Carlson just spoke of?
No, Madam Mayor, this is the Cultural Committee, which was an advisory committee to Council.
So the Cultural Development Committee?
Yeah.
Right, okay, thank you. Councillor Carlson.
So I guess the reason I brought up the community coalition, which is actually mysummerland.ca, and there are some things in their calendar right now, was to find out if there is any connection or communication between that group and the district, and whether or not we might want to rely on them to do something so that the district doesn't have to. I mean, I just wonder if we need to create our own cultural coalition if there's already one. I haven't asked them that question, but I think it's worth talking about.
So the question then, Lori, is does the coalition communicate with you? Is there liaison there, or is it crickets?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Right now, the district has been pretty much focused on working with the arts, the Summerland Community Arts Council, who is a member, I believe, of the Summerland Cultural Coalition. So I have no, I'm thinking this is Dan Dinsmore, who might be the chairperson of that group. But since COVID hit, I haven't been in communication with that group. I believe the cultural coordinator was involved with working closely with the Cultural Coalition, but I haven't heard from them since COVID. But I'm happy to work with them and engage and begin a discussion with them and see where that could go.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councillor Van Elpen in regards that it's too early to hire a community coordinator. But please correct me if I'm wrong, but when we talked about this in 2020, when the cuts happened, did we not discuss that a component of that or the liaison would then come out of your group, Lori, to work within the cultural, so that the committee didn't die? And I believe we brought on an extra staff person in that case to give you a hand. And my assumption, and I could be totally out to lunch, was that was part of what we were looking at, was to maintain that connection between the cultural groups and the renaming your department and moving into that. So I'm not sure if I was wrong or if I misunderstood, but I guess that would be more of a comment than a question. I guess there's a question embedded in there somewhere. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question through Madam Mayor. No, we have not added an additional person to our department for this work. It is something that I have taken on as a liaison. So I'm working closely with the museum and the Arts Council and any of the art projects that come up with the district. I've taken that piece on. And we have some staff within our department that are helping with the special event piece of that portfolio, the community development coordinator, to assist in developing resources and tools for special events. But as you know, special events has been pretty quiet for the last year. So we're trying to get a little bit proactive before special events start up. But we're just kind of absorbing that within our department. No additional stuff.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, sometimes it's difficult to look at these items in isolation of each other, but at the time when the cultural plan was being devised, one of the things we heard from the community was if I wanted to speak to somebody in the district about arts and culture, who do I call? And there was nobody. But now that so that's why those first two, placing it under a department was connected with the position, and we've done that now. It is if somebody wants to speak about arts and culture, they'll call Lori. I think we could have a discussion at some point in the future whether, or the CAO can have that discussion of whether Lori's the best person to be doing that or not. But it is there in our organizational chart. So I think I agree that we can keep the status quo on the positions. And I just a comment on the Cultural Coalition, just to keep in mind that it is a coalition of different organizations. It's not an organization itself. So it's a bit like Henry Kissinger saying, if I want to talk to Europe, who do I call? Right? There's not really an organization in itself. It's just a coalition of all these organizations working together, which is a great thing, and that came out of the cultural plan. That's what we've wanted to encourage, and we did encourage, and I think we should continue to encourage all these groups to work together, because what was happening is a lot of them were duplicating and working across purposes, and so the more we can get all these nonprofit organizations in town to work together and pool resources, I think the better off the community will be. Thanks.
I think the decision that needs to be made on the second one, that I think the community coordinator position, where we are all in agreement there. Shake your head if you're not. Okay. On the second one, the Community Cultural Committee, I think the decision there needs to be. We've got kind of two things going on here. We have the coalition, which, as Councillor Holmes said, is a loose group of a number of different cultural groups in Summerland. Not necessarily arts, but arts and cultural. And we also have the paused Committee of Council, which is the Cultural Development Committee. So if the district still wants to be involved in this, it's either reinstating the committee, not really reinstating, but getting it, having regular meetings again, or directing staff, a staff person, and that's up to Graham to decide who would be the liaison with the coalition and attend regular, if there is such a thing, regular coalition meetings. I think that's what the decision, yeah. Okay, thank you, Graham. Councillor Carlson, and then Councillor Holmes, and then Councillor Holmes.
Or at least just engage with them and see what kind of support or participation the district might give, right? I don't think we necessarily can go and ask to instill ourselves into their coalition, but I do think that it's worth getting an update and finding out where they're at, and if there's something we can do to work together so that we don't have to form a whole nother committee of the exact same people that are probably doing the cultural coalition. That would be my concern, is that we would basically ask the same people to come to our meeting when they're already having one.
So what I was suggesting is, if the district wants to be involved in the way that we used to be involved, we have to decide if we're going to have our cultural development committee, which did not exist of the same people, that was appointed by council, or do we want to have the district involved by attending coalition meetings? So the question is, I guess there's two questions. Do we want to have the district involved? And if we do, how should that look? Two different things. Just a sec, I'm going to go to Councillor Holmes. Councillor Carlson?
So yeah, I agree. There are two different things, and I do believe our community coordinator was involved in the coalition, and I think that's a fair ask of them if they want us to continue to be involved or not. As for the advisory committee, I think we need to be clear what we'd want them for, and because that would be to be advising us, and what do we need advice on, if at all. When speaking to a couple of the former members or the current members, they got the impression that it felt like they were just spinning wheels a lot of the time. They weren't really sure why they were there. And so I think we would need to review our terms of reference, provide pretty clear terms of reference, and really be clear in our own heads what it is that we need them for. And maybe we don't, or maybe we just put it on pause for now. I don't know. So, thanks.
Councillor Carlson, and then Councillor Van Elfen, did you have your hand raised? No.
I agree with Councillor Holmes.
Okay. Councillor Traynor, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would agree with Councillor Holmes as well. I feel like we have a lot going on right now, and I was actually just looking at the list of all the committees that we have. I think that having a liaison with that coalition might be a good idea if that's something that they want. Until we have, a to-do list for a district committee, I don't think that we should be recruiting people to be on that unless we have something for them to do in a mandate. So I think just leave it for now and see if the coalition wants our help at all.
Okay. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree. I think, as Councillor Holmes has indicated, that if the past members felt that they were spinning their wheels, I think it's doing more harm than it was doing good. So if we can work with the coalition, might be more fruitful than us creating our own and them not feeling empowered in the decisions that are made. Thank you.
Okay, so again, there are two different things here. To establish or reestablish a community cultural committee, that would be a no. And I guess reach out, and correct me if I'm wrong, Council, in understanding this, reach out to the coalition. Is Dan still the head of the coalition? Does anyone know? Yes, he is. To reach out to Dan Dinsmore. Laura, you probably know Dan, right? And find out if they need anything on, from the district's standpoint. Personally, I think, like Councillor Traynor said, there's so much going on right now, especially, well, no, everywhere, but you have a lot on your plate right now, and I wouldn't want you to spend a whole lot of time on this, but that is the decision of you and Graham. Okay, that's just my thought. Do I have that right, to reach out to the coalition and see where things are going? Okay. And see if you might be able to assist. Good, Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, we'll do that, and we could certainly report back to council if in fact you know, they're focused on their agenda and they don't have an interest in a regular presence of the district. And part of it is what we can do for them. I think the other part is what can the coalition do with and for the district, and we'll explore both sides of that.
Yes, it's the Kennedy question, right? Okay. The next one is, I think, develop a public art policy. Councillor Holmes?
So this is one thing that I was hoping the advisory committee would actually work on. But I was speaking to Janet Peake recently, the new president of the Arts Council, and she was saying that the Arts Council would be interested in drafting a public art policy to present to council, which I think is kind of an offer that might be worth taking them up on. I know in a lot of other communities, the Arts Council, that's something the Arts Council would do, would be to draft something like that on, I believe in Campbell River, the Arts Council there did it. I saw a presentation once of it, and I think they have a very good public art policy in Campbell River. So I think, you know, anything like this where the community would like to step up and kind of provide, you know, do something like that, it's worth listening to them and supporting them. Because I think we need one.
I think Councillor Holmes and Councillor Carlson, you're both on the downtown neighborhood, yes. Is there, I can't remember, I know that we discussed this. Is there a representative from the Arts and Culture Group? No. Okay, yeah. It kind of makes sense that that would be part of that discussion, but what do you think, Council? Councillor Carlson.
I think that that's actually a very good idea, and I think that we should talk to the Arts Council about it. And then perhaps the Arts Council wants to present to the Downtown Plan Task Force and talk about what that public art might, how we might incorporate that into a downtown plan. Make it all part of what's happening, and you get more good voices involved too.
Councillor Holmes?
I'd say yes, but public art doesn't have to just be downtown. It can be anywhere. I remember when we were putting the waste scales in at the landfill, I thought that was kind of a missed opportunity to put a really cool piece of public art made of recycled work or something at the entrance of the landfill. So I don't think it needs to be, you know, we don't need to be thinking just downtown. There's the waterfront as well for public art, places for public art.
Yeah, I didn't intend for that statement to exclude other areas of Summerland because, you know, there's all kinds of opportunities there. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree. I would welcome the Arts Council coming up with some type of proposal to present to council. I think it's a great opportunity and to maybe hear what they have to say. And I agree, you know, it's not all about downtown. I agree with that 100%. That's why I said earlier, this is a culture that needs to be adopted throughout our whole district in the development, right from the development area. You know, it could be a company coming in wanting to do some project. Well, how's that going to look when it's finished? Where's the public art component of that? You know, the landscaping, how's this all going to fit in? And these are questions we could be asking from day one. And as for the waste scale, the people that work in the scale shack are doing a lovely job decorating. Thank you.
Thank you. That reminds me, as you said that, as a whole community, I'm not sure how many of you attended the Silga AGM, but there was the next area, presumably, that it'll be held is in Salmon Arm, and they have erected a huge, I think it's, oh, I'm not going to say because I can't remember for sure, treble clef on 5 on the staff at the entrance to downtown Salmon Arm. It's absolutely amazing. So another example of, now that happens to be downtown, but another example of the creativity. And it's a beautiful piece. And it's made of steel. And there was a big celebration, for the community, of course, with masks on and all of that. But yeah, so lots of opportunities there. So I'm not sure in terms of process how that would work. Director of Corporate Services, if it's a matter of just, I shouldn't say just, but of, getting in, writing a letter and asking them to do that, or how that would look. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just suggest on this one, Lori and I can go sit down with the President and explore the opportunity and see where it takes us. I think it has merit and lots of potential, so we can have that through a conversation and maybe follow it up with a letter based on that conversation.
Good, that's great. Okay. So the next item is paused, but it talks about the $20,000 going into the downtown neighborhood plan. The next one is build capacity by creating opportunities to support, empower, and recognize, oh, this is a big one, community volunteers and volunteer organizations. I know we've talked a lot about that pre-COVID at the, in fact, Angelique was still here. We did that at the, we had a day-long workshop, and we talked quite a bit about that. Any thoughts on this one, Council? Councillor Holmes.
I think it's still valid, but as you pointed out, it's quite a lot, and maybe it's not a priority right now. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe, and I know that it costs something, but the South Okanagan-Similkameen Volunteers Society, to become a member of that, and they will send out email blasts on when it is that you need volunteers and what they're needed for. That's a possibility too, even if it's an interim possibility. So anybody else want to add some comment to this one, or should this be continue to pause? Pause? Okay. Work with Summerland Museum and Heritage Society to develop a long-term plan to support the museum.
Mayor Boot, may I just add something to that last bullet point?
Yes, I'm sorry, I missed your hand. Thank
Sorry,
you.
no, I just thought of it now. I just wanted to add that there used to be volunteer appreciation nights, which we all know about, and I got really good feedback from the volunteers in Summerland who attended those. I think that they really enjoyed it, and so when we can bring those back, I definitely think that we should, because it builds community spirit and it really makes the volunteers feel appreciated. So that's just some feedback that I received from people who attended them in the past.
You're right, that's a very good point. And they were pretty significant too. Yeah, those were really good. Okay, on to the Summerland Museum one. Thoughts? Councillor Holmes?
Isn't it happening though? I mean, we had a big presentation from the museum of their plans, and so I thought that was happening.
Lori, were you looking for something further?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Maybe a little, maybe Councillor Holmes can provide a little bit more clarity behind that specific recommendation. I wasn't sure if it was to develop a master plan or what the content was around a long-term plan. We do have a 10-year lease agreement with them, which is progress towards working together and supporting. And yes, they've come up with a recommendation for an expansion project, but I wasn't sure if there was more to this item. So that would be helpful if council has some insight.
Can you provide any insight, Councillor Holmes?
I don't think so. I think that was it. Is that, what they're talking about? But the museum would be the best people to ask.
Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah. As you know, I attend the museum board meetings, and they are busy working with staff and the district already with the renovations and the lease agreement, and I think I haven't sensed any sort of need to formalize anything at this time. They've got lots on their plate as it is, mostly trying to get their materials in order, because for a long time there was a lot of material received, and it was sort of it's got to be cataloged and organized, and it's a lot of work once it's been accepted. If it's not really relevant to Summerland, that it be decommissioned, or no, there's a proper term, I think. And so they're busy. They're really busy, and I don't think there's anything more. But if there's something that they need to work with the district, then we can address it at that time. But yeah, I don't see that any energy has to be expended on that right now.
Councillor Barkwell, you'll be attending the AGM coming up next month?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking of going to that too, so maybe we can get a better idea if anything comes up at that. Did you have, Councillor Graham?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say I have reached out, I have met with a couple of the members of the Executive Museum. And certainly there is a lot of interplay and dialogue between the district and the museum on a pretty regular basis, and the plans are rather iterative. They've got plans for the museum, there's repairs at the museum, they've got ideas for the courtyard, they're engaging the Arts and Cultural Center on some of those ideas, and us. And I would say that it would be great if we could sort of maintain that iterative ongoing dialogue rather than trying to codify all that in a specific and formal long-term plan. And in that sense, this could maybe go into abeyance.
Okay, does that sound good for you, Lori? Okay, good. The next one is name a street or public space after George Riga. And I would like to add the Pierre family there. There was a third one too, and I'm sorry, I've forgotten it. It was just a really short name. Does anybody remember? Councillor Barkwell.
There was discussion about naming Veterans Way by the park, that across from the Broad Street development. Years ago, before it was even started, that was suggested, but for one reason or another, because it wasn't in the policy, it never really happened.
Yeah, that's not the one I was thinking about. I remember that though. I think it was on Jubilee, part of Jubilee. Councillor Carlson, do you remember?
I don't remember. I do think it's funny that we have Jubilee East and West and they don't connect to each other. But if you've been here long enough, you know they used to connect. I have just a question on how you might go about a process of, George Riga is an important person in our community and the history of our community. We're currently investing, like our CIO just said, a lot of time and energy and money into the Arts and Cultural Center, the museum, as well as what was just called the courtyard area, but it's, for lack of a better term, it is a park. So I'm just wondering, do we have a plan in place going forward to name that piece of property? Are we going to give the Arts and Cultural Center a better name than the Summerland Arts and Cultural Center? Is that something that council gets to move forward on, or is that something we ask the cultural community to bring to us? Has it been given any thought in the cultural plan? Because I think that's where this fits a little bit, at least starting that conversation about it.
If I recall, it was probably Peter High, who was the president at that time, who brought forward the request. And then there was, I think that's when the veterans came forward. That was the second time I think the Veterans Way came forward. And then we got the Pierre request, the Pierre family request. I don't know. Seems to me if we're going to have a town square, and I'm just hoping that we will, that would be a great thing to name after Mr. Riga. But just my thoughts. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thanks. Along with Jubilee East and West, and we now have Kelly North and South, and it's unfortunate. That was a lost opportunity before the development went in there not to rename that street, because now people have their addresses and there's all that deal with the post office you have to deal with. So yeah, that was a missed opportunity for sure. But I guess the first step would be just to add Riga to the list of names. That's the list of approved names that are in the that's in the bylaw. I think Pierre's already on that list since we have a street named Pierre, so they must be on the list. But just to look at that list and add it, that'd be the first step. Thanks.
Well, it says that in the document that it needs to be added, and I'm not sure where that is yet. But the question, I guess, is, are we going to, like, where does this sit in terms of the priorities of implementing the plan? Councillor Van Elfen and then Councillor Holmes.
Again, I think Councillor Carlson said it best. Maybe we turn this over to the Arts Council and for some recommendations, especially the Riga name. You know, it might be the Riga Arts Center. It might be the Riga Courtyard. We had discussions on the Pierre naming a while back. I think we even talked about a roundabout, you know, so maybe there's opportunity there for public art in the roundabout. You know, maybe a commissioned piece of Indigenous art, I have no idea, but I think at this time, you know, capacity-wise, we turn it over to the Arts Center and see what they come back with some thoughts and ideas.
Oh, I think the reason we're talking about naming a street is because that's what the Riga folks came up with. That's what they came forward to us with. Doesn't have to be that way, but that's what the request was. Same with Veterans Way, that was what the request was, and Pierre, and then the other one that I can't remember. So I don't have any problem with that suggestion by Councillor Carlson either. What does the rest of council think? This is something that we should ask the Arts Council to have a look at, and then if it includes changing our policy, then of course that's something the district will need to take care of. Councillor Barkwell, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Holmes had his hand up first, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Barkwell.
Certainly, I think the Arts Council would be an organization we'd want to consult, but I don't think it's, I don't think we necessarily want them to lead this. This is community streets, this is the community square, the community's roundabouts and whatnot. So I think, you know, it's something that we would need to drive. So that's just my thoughts. And I think we certainly should do that. It's the question, of course, is priority and time and everything like that. And so, you know, where it fits on the priority, I don't know, but I think things like naming the roundabout after Pierre and you know, all these people, everybody kind of agrees with all these in principle, and I don't think it takes a whole lot just amending the bylaw to include Riga on the list of street names. So I think we should do what we can to take the low-hanging fruit and do it, and hopefully it wouldn't require too much work. But and all the questions Councillor Carlson asked, I think, are good questions, and we need to answer them at some points. But it's up to us, not to the Arts Council, to answer them.
Councillor Barkwell.
Okay. The action item that needs to be addressed is name a street or public space after George Riga. Well, if there's a public space, it has to be, in my mind, you know, connected with the arts and the drama and music to an extent. So there's probably more possibilities than I can think of. So I certainly agree with handing it over to the Arts and Cultural group to make some suggestions, and a street maybe, but certainly not just a street, because some street in the middle of somewhere up in Hunter's Hill or something like that, that doesn't have the same connection to what we really feel for. And like Councillor Holmes says, I mean, currently our policy has a list of names of war veterans and says all these names will be on the next available streets until this list is exhausted. And that's looked upon as being some sort of cast in stone policy, and there's been big emotional reluctance to ever vary from that policy. And I don't think that it should be such a big deal. We should, if something like this comes up and it's community significance, and we can vary from it, and council makes the policy and it's a done deal. So let's go with that suggestion as my.
Thank you. So the suggestion of going with asking the Summerland Arts Council to give us some thoughts on this, as there are, recognized group in Summerland. Could I have nods or head shakes? Okay, who's in favor with doing that? Yes, go ahead. Well, we're asking them to not adjust our policy, but asking them if they could put some consideration to what or where, I guess, George Riga's name and significance to Summerland can be respected and honored. If it's the Arts Center or, whatever it happens to be, leave that decision, at least to come back with recommendations to the district on where it is they'd like to see that. Councillor Van Elfen?
And along with that, they may want to have a conversation with the school district, Center Stage Theater. It could be George Riga Theater. I don't.
Not sure if it can be, it's the Janet Ritchie, actually.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. But you're absolutely right. I mean, that connects with arts and culture, right? So does that clarify okay. So show of hands, who would like to, would you like to ask the Summerland Arts Council to come up with some ideas about this? Yes? Okay, good. That's that one. Let's do the last one that's on here, and then we'll take a short break. Everyone okay with that? Okay. And that's develop clear, cohesive, creative signage and maps that, and there's 6 bullet points there. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, well, as was pointed out, we started it, we put some new signs there, which look okay. But that was kind of phase 1, and so what we have now is a mishmash of different styles of signs, which looks a little odd, I think. I think we should finish the project if we can. Of course, that depends on funding. And then as we had our discussion with the PIB, we should somehow to figure out how to get some Silix place naming as well in there. So I think this is still a really important project, and it's something we've talked about at the downtown task force plan, that signage is important, and I think we need to continue it, and if anything, it's gotten a little more complicated.
Yeah, it would be really helpful for people, even people that live here that are not aware of all the attractions that we have here. Councillor Traynor.
Yeah, it would be nice to continue with that project. Like, I know down in Trout Creek, we still have the old signs, especially for Powell Beach, and even a couple of the little pullouts that give public access to the beach. Like the signs, I don't know when they were done, but they say like positively no camping. Like it's just weird wording that's left over from a long time ago. So I don't think we've budgeted for that time soon, but I do think that we need to, I mean, we started it, so I think we should try to finish it. That's my thoughts.
In terms of when, I think we probably all agree that it'd be nice to have a cohesive policy signage around, but it does cost dollars, and it does, you know, take staff time, and there's always the issue of capacity. So where, oh, I see that Mr. Svetlichny is highlighted there. Did you want to speak about the financial side of things, Dave?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What I can say in regards to the signage is the financial plan that council passed back in February has allocated $40,000 of funding for the kind of to finish off that phase 3 directional signage project. So that's for 2022. And the note that I have on my file here is 2022 was chosen to provide for the downtown plan being completed first. So that's why it's been moved to 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really good information. And it certainly makes sense to have that downtown plan considered as well. So you said 40,000, and that's for 2022. So that is council okay then hearing that we're looking at next year, which is only 7 months from now? Yes? Okay. Councillor Traynor, nod or a shake? Good. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lori, for that. Other than receiving this for information, is there anything else that you need from us?
Nope, that was very helpful. Thank you, Council.
Okay, so if I could have someone bring forward receiving this for information, Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Holmes. Yes, further discussion.
I just want to thank staff for bringing this forward. I'm all tangled. This update was excellent. I've been waiting 5 years to see something like this. So I'm really happy that this came to us. So thank you.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Just a comment about Councillor Traynor mentioned those signs in Trail Creek where it says positively no camping. What's her recommendation? Change it to absolutely no camping? Or?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so I'll call the question then. All in favor? Any opposed? Great. Thank you very much for this, Lori and Graham. I know that it took a lot of work. So thank you. Okay, Council, let's take a break. It's 3:08 almost. Let's reconvene at 3:20.